with our guests and our guest speaker. And I understand that there are even people on the way that haven't made it yet. So we're looking forward to them. You have the liturgy tonight. We'll have a brief worship service, and then we'll turn it over to Northside Jones. So why don't we start with Psalm 125, and I'll start to read the bold, and you read the more fine print. Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion,
which cannot be shaken but endures forever.
As the mountains surround Jerusalem,
so the Lord surrounds his people both now and forever.
The scepter of the wicked will not remain
over the land allotted to the righteous. Then the righteous might use their hands to do evil.
Lord, do good to those who are good,
to those who are upright in heart,
for those who turn to crooked ways.
The Lord will avenge evildoers.
Peace be on Israel. We're going to sing this hymn, What Wondrous Love Is This? 2 verses. It's a familiar passage. You're going to recognize it, and we'll read it, and then we'll just I'll make some brief comments on it, then we'll sing and pray, and then I'll turn it over to John. So beginning with verse 1. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the desert, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and at the end of them he was hungry. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man does not live on bread alone." The devil led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, "I will give you all their authority and splendor, for it has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. So if you worship me, it will all be yours." Jesus answered, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." The devil led him to Jerusalem and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you carefully. They will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Jesus answered, it says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. And then it concludes with, when the devil had finished all his tempting, he left him until an opportune time. All right, we'll just kind of work through this a little bit at a time. There's an awful lot going on here in these 13 verses. For instance, I guess you caught that Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert, where for 40 days he was tempted. There are an awful lot of associations that we're supposed to catch. The 40 days, for instance, should remind everyone of 40 days that Moses was on Mount Sinai or on Mount Horeb. 40 years Israel wandered in the wilderness. 40 being a special time. When I was in Israel, 10 years ago now, about 9 years ago now, I guess it was. We had a little tour guide who, tried to fill us in on things, and I can remember him saying about the 40 days that in ancient times, somewhere along the way, it was discovered that if you walked from the oasis of the Nile to the oasis of the Euphrates, it took about 40 days. And 40 then became a way of saying it took you however long it did. 40 days meant whatever it was you were doing got complete. You finished it. It might have actually taken 20 days or 80 days, but you'd say you took 40 days because that became a saying. The distance from the Nile up to the Euphrates. So all that is to say, he was tempted for 40 days until they finished. Until he and the devil finished this. Now, there are 3 temptations. Again, we've been playing with 40, and so there's 3. You could imagine there'd be 7 or 12 or 24. There are numbers that like to be played with. 3 is all over the Bible, so it's not unusual to think that there were 3 temptations. I don't think there were just 3, but there are 3 that are mentioned here, and the 3 have a certain format to it. The first one is personal. He ate nothing during those days. At the end of them, he was hungry. And so the devil said, well, you're the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread. Now, let me tell you that when we do things like we say, oh, I'm being tempted to eat another piece of chocolate, or I'm tempted to stay up late and watch this show when I know I have to get up in the morning, or when we have some kind of a light, trivial temptation, that's not what's being talked about here. And it's not generally what's being talked about in the Bible at all when temptation is talked about. The word for temptation probably should be translated as a test, and not just a test, but a test of character, a test of integrity, a test of who you are. Notice what the devil says: if you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread. Yeah, it's personal in that Jesus was hungry, and the devil knew that, but it was related to who he was. If you're the Son of God, then do this. Eating a piece of chocolate, or staying up late, or doesn't have anything to do with who you are. Different kind of tests do that. So anyway, he says, tell the stone to become bread, and Jesus says, look, guy, it's written, man does not live on bread alone. And I've often wondered about this, but the devil doesn't argue with him. He just goes on to number 2, which is a kind of a political test. All right, the first one's more personal. He was hungry. And political. It says the devil led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, I'll give you all their authority and splendor, for it's been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. So if you worship me, it'll all be yours. See, again, it's about integrity. It's who who Jesus was. If you're the Son of God, if you bow down and worship me. And you know what happens right after this is Jesus begins his ministry. It's like these were tests that Luke has Jesus pass before he can go on and begin proclaiming the kingdom of God. Anyway, Jesus says, it's written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And that's the end of that one. Finally, the third one says, the devil led him to Jerusalem and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. And he says again, another integrity question. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you carefully. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. And the first one was personal and the second one was political. This seems like publicity seeking almost. Be up high on the pinnacle of the temple where everybody can watch, jump off, and trust God for a miracle. For the angels to keep you from being dashed on the rocks below. And Jesus answers, do not put the Lord your God to the test. There's that same word that's translated temptation up in the first part. Same word. Anyway, do not put the Lord your God to a test. When I was in graduate school at Oral Roberts University, but not all of you all know this story, but I spent 2 years in graduate school in Tulsa. While I was there from 79 to 81. There were a couple of ORU students who died while we were there, medically related, who went off some medication, didn't go to hospitals. I'm not entirely sure at this point what it was, but in one year, a couple students died. And one of my professors, his name was Charles Farah, wrote a book about it. Kind of the extreme faith teaching, faith healing was a big deal in Tulsa. And anyway, Charles wrote a book called From the Pinnacle of the Temple. That was the title, based on this passage here. And he tried to discourage students from not taking their medication when they needed to. On the big picture about this passage, scholars as far back as Augustine said that what you have here is Jesus being a new Adam, or a different Adam. As Adam was cast out of paradise, go back to Genesis, as Adam was cast out of paradise into the wilderness, so Jesus, the new Adam, goes into the wilderness, not to perish there, but to conquer and come out to lead us. The early church saw Jesus as going into the desert here, going into the wilderness, as a way of reversing what had happened in the Garden of Eden. That's enough on that. Any comments or questions about that? All right, that's probably more than you ever wanted to know about all that. But I will tell you that the same Jesus who went off into the wilderness is the Jesus who loves you. And we're going to sing 2 verses of Jesus Loves You.
Jesus
My name was John Muhammad Salaban Kigli Adban. I belong to Joyce Jones. Tonight, it's John Simpleton Jones. We're going to talk a little bit, continuing a trip that I took this summer. And this time we're going to focus on Petra. And I'm expecting some other people, but so far they haven't shown up. I'm dressed as I travel. Now, I did not travel with this hat, but I think it's kind of neat. So I got it, and I'm putting it on my head. Now, what I want to try to do, and let's see, electronics, my stars, electronics are kind of difficult. 2 hours ago, none of this was working. So I brought my phone in case I have to call Best Buy Geek Service to get it to work correctly. They said I should push this button, and this is where we're going to start. And we push this button, and we're going to start from the beginning, and here we go. And then we're going to go back so we can kind of catch up with ourselves. Oh, thunder. What did I do? Okay, here we go. Okay. This is a satellite view of Wadi Rum to Petra. It's about 60 miles. It's about 2 hours on the bus. This is the end. This is actually the Gulf of Aqaba here. The Red Sea and so forth is down here. This is Israel. This is Jordan. The Dead Sea is further on up. Just to kind of give a little bit of a geographical idea, and then we go to the road to Petra. This is leaving Wadi Rum, and this is what it looked like. The next one is the luggage train. I think some of you may remember that my suitcase was gone for about a month, or about a week when I first arrived. This time I got on the bus, and they said, you need to put your suitcase on this vehicle here. I did it with great trepidation. Every once in a while, I would look out the window to see, in fact, if it were in proximity. And sometimes it was, and sometimes it wasn't, but most of the time, this was the vehicle. I thought this was kind of interesting. When they needed to do an embankment, wouldn't it be neat if we had on I-27 something like this rather than concrete walls? Now, America is all over the world, even in Jordan. What this says is Dale Engelhardt, the fellow that was the race driver. I mean, why would you be on a road, superhighway as it goes, in Jordan and start racing with all of this kind of stuff? Well, energy is very important. And these are taken from the highway. Those column type things in the back are windmill. If you've traveled in the West, you've seen many windmills. They're building them there. That's what it looks like up close. But look, lower left. That's what you see on the highways. Shepherds. There's a finished windmill. Gas tank. Anybody have any idea what gas is per gallon in Jordan in about April of this year? $5.50 a gallon. Not too bad as world prices go. In Europe, that's not uncommon. But that's a typical gas station. Now, we're finally sort of getting into Petra, and this is the terrain of what Petra looks like. The star is kind of where the city is, and the city is called Moussa, M-O-U-S-A, or Wadi Yusa. Wadi means nothing more than creek bed. So where the city and the area, and there's several wadis, several creeks, where the new city is called Wadi Yusa. Now the red line is in a canyon lower, and that's sort of the area that we're going to be visiting in Petra itself. It is among all of those mountains. So that looks pretty rugged country. Far beyond is northwest, and that will be the Dead Sea. Now, the last time we met, we shared a very different environment than what we live in here in Chattanooga. One person told me, after it was over, he said, you know, that was an excellent presentation about a place that I would never want to go. I thought that was pretty good, because is very different. It is the land of the wilderness. Petra is a place well beyond my imagination. About 20 years ago, I was on assignment in Saudi Arabia and had heard about it. It's an illusion that became a part of a bucket list. And I wanted to perfect that component of the bucket before the bucket perfected me. And it took 20 years to be able to eventually take this trip. The old Petra is sort of a historical ghost. And it is that ghost that I want to share with you all tonight, the illusion of that ghost. It's probably one of the most fascinating places one could go. But I'm not sure how many people would want to live there. Now, last week we had to cancel the program. And we had to cancel it because of water. Water is very, very significant to the history, the power, and the creation of Petra. Look at that countryside. The Nabateans are the ones that knew where the water was, knew how to manage it hydraulically among those mountains, save it, and store it. And that is one of the components of the history and the significance of Petra, as it is today. This past Sunday, I think Paul said, 1 cup of cold water is enough for eternal reward. This is stored water. This is a cup. For those of you who want to, you weren't at church on Sunday, and we were not, look at our website, look at last Sunday's sermon. 1 cup of water. I said cold water, but 1 cup of water is enough for eternal reward. Every time we baptize someone, we use water. It is the most important element of Petra. We're going to talk about the contemporary Petra a little bit, and then we're going to go to its ancient cousin. Now, my dress, as I mentioned, is what I wore when I was traveling. Not when I was working, not necessarily every day, but when I was traveling. I'm sort of keeping an eye on the door out here because I still am looking for a couple of my cousins to show up. As we go through these slides, if you have any questions, for clarification, bring them up. Last time we didn't have a question period. At the end, if you have questions of different than clarification, that's when we want to talk about them. And in the meantime, let's take a trip. We're getting close.
Got a question. Are those camera laws, or is that the mood and the Venus?
Well, when you're taking pictures on a trip,
This is out the window, so it's a fog.
yeah, well, it's a fog and it's probably dirt and who knows what it is, but it is not really there.
Okay.
Thank you. Every time you get close to a tourist place, all right, this is a World Heritage Site, there's going to be tourist traps. Or places where you can get some pretty neat souvenirs. This is one of them. This is going into Petra. We're getting closer into Petra. See how there's some modern cities, modern structures, if you will, in Jordanian architecture, typically concrete. Looking down, we're not quite into Petra yet. My assignment in Petra was to work at a youth hostel. This is the youth hostel, the pink type building. It was called the Valentine Inn. My responsibility, and this was this workaway website, my responsibility was unknown to me until I got there. It turned out to be that I was to help serve dinner, I was to help wash the sheets, I didn't have to iron the sheets, but I had to fold the sheets and put them up. You know, where's Joyce? Honey, I really do appreciate you. I also was asked to write a little paragraph about their meal, and that was going to be printed and taken down to the village area and distributed for the tourists. One of the things I was asked to do was to describe the 40 salads. Well, that was the first inkling I had that there might be a problem with this place because there were only 30 salads. And when I pointed that out, I was told to do what I was told to do and nothing else. This was my boss. She's from Sri Lanka. When she said, or when I asked for instructions, she pointed to these, this is cucumbers and yogurt, and she did. So, and that meant took them out and distributed them to the guests. Sri Lanka speaks English, but I couldn't understand her accent. Gentleman on the right, born in Sri Lanka, now lives in Switzerland. Probably comes from a fairly wealthy family, traveling around the world with about what you see, that backpack. On the left is from Mexico. The gentleman on the left turned out to be a pretty interesting friend. I was supposed to have a single room. Another disappointment. Mine is where the suitcase type thing is. Well, what happened, my friend from Mexico and I and the Sri Lanka fellow were standing. And the Mexican fellow comes up and he says, do you know about the bus schedule to Amman? And I said, no, I don't, but the owner is right here. Let's ask him. And as soon as we asked him, the owner said to the Mexican, I told you that there was only one bus and it's already gone, and why are you asking him? He doesn't know anything. Well, that last part of it was right. But we sort of stepped back, and I thought that was not really hospitality. It turns out that, in fact, my Mexican friend has one of these little things on the computer and looked on the internet and found out that there were like 15 buses going from Petra to Amman after it turns out that the owner has a cousin and a brother who has taxi service. So he was saying, I'm sorry that you missed the bus earlier, but I can make arrangements through my good friends to taxi you down there. A little bit of disingenuity. So I started looking for hotels, thinking, well, this may not work out. The Petra Diamond Hotel is about $20 a night. The one on the right, I was afraid to go into. This is the hotel that I found. The red arrow is sort of the cafe. I went into the hotel, asked to speak to the person in charge, and I said, I'd like for a room, and I'm going to be here several nights. And how much is it? And he looked at me, and he said, how would you like to work here? And I said, well, normally, when I work, I get room and board. I was thinking about living with Joyce. Well, what should I do, he says. I said. And he said, I want you to write a letter advertising our travel business. So I said, okay, give me some ideas, parameters, and so forth. And I spent about 4 hours, Sunday afternoon, putting this letter together, going through some editing process with him, and for 4 days and nights, I stayed in the hotel with room and board, and that was all I ever did. Every morning I would go to him, what else would you like me to do? And he said he was very pleased with it. What else would you like me to do? No, that's okay. He showed me around a little bit of town. We jumped in his car. Then on the last day, when I said I really need to kind of be moving on, he said, well, how would you like to live here? How would you like to manage the hotel? This gentleman was in his late 40s. He was German Jordanian. He's the one that told me, do not trust anybody, especially if they are from Jordan. Do not trust even your brother. He said, for example, Muhammad, the fellow that I was working for in Wadi Rum, was known to him. He's in the travel business in Wadi Rum. Came to Petra, talked to the owner, and said, I can provide some pretty neat desert sites for your guests here. The owner said, Mohammed al-Sabah, Well, don't you have a brother? Yes, I do. Well, actually, I've been doing business with your brother for the last 5 years. Muhammad al-Sabah, my host. He is no good. What is he charging you? I will charge less. I was able by then to, I think Joyce, it was through emails or something, to ask her if she would like to move.
You sure did.
To Petra. A 4-bedroom house would be available. Plus all the rooms in the hotel. All you could eat in this location here. One of the reasons I'm here is she said no. This is the restaurant that we ate in, and in the red and kind of gray shirt is the owner. He was a worker. That was my breakfast. This is bread baked on the street outside the hotel. This was looking down from my room. And this is a bank, and then a medical center. Joyce, I don't know whether you've seen this slide or not, but it's a medical center and lab. You could have gotten a job as a medical technologist. Notice the fellow with the white cap in the left is rather dressed traditionally. A lot of that, the fellow that went into the bank as it was open was coat and tie. So you had all kinds of dress. If you got hungry, you went to the local butcher. Jordan Spirit Tours was the tourist agency that my owner friend was just starting up. He wanted me to write a letter in English and send it to all the French. He said the French were the best market. Well, why would they want an English composed letter? Because English is the international travel language. So I wrote it. This is just little stores, the way cities are. Construction, whether it's new or old, who knows? Notice the circle? I couldn't bring all my wives tonight from last week, but I brought a representation of one. And I'm sorry, sweetheart. You need to see this. There. When they're out in public, it's like this. In private, they can be. The guy on the left was a shoe shine fella. A neat guy, very small shop. My shoes had been pretty well rotten when I was working in the springs in Wadi Rum. He repaired them, polished them, gave them new life. The fellow on the right, I love that face. He worked in a hardware store. And back on the, by the blanket in the back here is a yellow bag. It comes from, it's kind of like going to Walmart and getting a bag to take home. This one comes from a German company. He was selling those things, and I think I paid $1 for it. And that bag actually was a savior, because as I would go and get books or add trinkets or things like that, that became my luggage. And it was easy, because you didn't have to unpack it and do all this kind of stuff when you went through customs. All you did is open it up. I just think that's a part of our international culture, and I just love that face. Now, this is the traditional place where Moses struck the rock for water. Part of this time, I wrote a journal. I want to go through a couple of journal pages. April 8th. I am now in Wadi Musa, the village adjacent to Petra, having breakfast. After a night in my workaway hostel where the promised single room was not provided, and finding a situation where I have a regular hotel room in exchange for writing some advertising for the El Rashad Hotel, I moved here. While I very much enjoyed the travelers I met at the Valentine Inn, I enjoyed a private bath this morning, and now a smorgasbord of breakfast of dates, hummus, scrambled eggs, naan, yogurt, pickles, carrots, sweet bread, and a couple of cheeses, and several other kinds of processed meat, and a few things that didn't move. On my walkabout yesterday, upon returning from the welcome area of Petra, I stopped in a small electronic shop to buy a charging cord for my Kindle. After paying $2 for it, the noted price, the written price, the fellow handed me back $1. and said, Abandullah. To God we give thanks, he interpreted. We shared mutual smiles and brotherhood, and I moved on. Probably the first time in my travels that I have ever not negotiated for something, paid the price, and then the salesperson returned half the value. Another day, after a couple of hours of trying to conclude arrangements for my next stop and wanting to fulfill my obligations to Mr. Rashid, the hotel, I finally approached, and some of you guys will enjoy this, I finally approached the lady in the hotel's restaurant. Excuse me, I said, but may I bother you for a moment? I said as I sat myself at the table next to hers. She said, of course, yes. I told her that Mr. Rashad was looking for a manager for the hotel, and I promised that I would look around. I had noticed her bearing, her beauty and class, and was curious if she might by chance be interested. She graciously, much to Joyce's surprise, declined, saying that she was very happily employed, but flattered by the question. Turned out she was a British Airways stewardess from Slovakia. And she was there to look at old Petra. Otherwise, we chatted for a while, and I got back to my immediate needs. They were to map my route to Petra the next several days. What would I see when I was actually in the old city? And try to fix my next assignment date in and around Jerusalem. Otherwise, in and around Petra. I met the most amazing people. The older Bedouin gentleman who stopped along the highway asking if I needed a ride as I was midway through my 5-mile trek from Little Petra back to Petra. For example, hospitality. While riding back to town, I really don't know what we talked about, but we departed each other's company in front of my hotel with low and eternal vows of brotherhood. Also another fellow, the young shopkeeper, who provided tea because I reminded him of his grandfather. Never did he try to sell anything. Every time I would walk by, he would bring out the stools and we would have tea. 2 Chinese girls whom I met along the way to the monastery, we'll see it. I saw them later in the trip. An Indian couple, very well traveled in the world, but they had never been to the United States. Back to this. This is the traditional place where Moses struck the water. Take the rod, speak to the rock, that it may yield its water. And water came forth abundantly. Now those of us who know that Moses didn't speak to the rock. He hit the rock, and that caused problems later. Nevertheless, water flowed forth abundantly. Again, water significant to the World Heritage Site of Petra. One of the most remarkable sites of the ancient world, situated amidst rugged hills and narrow gorges, its architecture is still extraordinarily magnificent, even after the ravages of time, wind, rain, earthquakes, and people. In Petra, Mother Nature has achieved one of her most original creations with improbable geometry and unbelievable colors. It is one of the few places in the world where the work of man truly complemented divine creation. This is where Petra is. We're leaving, we're going down. Now, I have a cousin, and his name is Rhode Island Jones. And actually, Rhode Island was missing. And I'm sorry. I need to answer this. It's going well. This is Northside Jones. Minnesota. Minnesota, where are you? Oh, well, what about cousin Indiana? Oh, he was, oh, you think, okay. Well, is he with Oklahoma Jones? Oh, no, he traveled from California Jones. I I see, okay. Well, let me, bye-bye. Folks, I need to kind of run out for a minute. I'm going to go to the next slide. This is where Paul takes over. I think one of my cousins may be outside.
I've actually forgotten what I'm supposed to say. Had to do something with Rhode Island Jones and these are the references to Petra in the Old Testament, and if you look, Petra itself, the city, is never mentioned, but the location of the Horites was thought to be there. The Nabateans, it was the kingdom, that territory was the kingdom of Nabateh, and when it has the traditional location of principles in conflict with Edom, the story goes when the children of Israel were leaving Egypt, they wanted to go through the land of Edom, and the Nabateans wouldn't let them, and so the Israelites and the Nabateans were not on good terms for most of their history. That's about all I can tell you about the biblical part of Petra. The previous slide, Rhode Island Jones. The Jones family evidently are known for several things besides general eccentricity. They are known for their facility with bullwhip, but if you had looked closely at Rhode Island Jones, he has a scar right here, kind of on his chin, where he caught himself with the bullwhip when he was learning. And I think, as far as I can tell, I think most people who mess with bullwhips have scars or at least cuts and bruises from that sort of thing. Anybody here, by the way, been to Petra besides John? Is anybody here? Y'all been there?
Yeah, we've been.
How long ago?
Oh, about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
It's really it's about as far away from here as possible. It's in a desert in Jordan, you know. It's very, very remote. And you think you really are in a foreign country. You really are. I think it's also dangerous to be there unless you have a guard and people with you.
Yeah.
I don't say how John ever did, because when we went, we had a police officer, a driver, a tourist guide for 6 people.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What am I hearing? Wait a minute. What is this? You hear that?
That's Indiana Jones.
Oh, Silver, away! Get off now. Let's go. Let's go. Oh! Those of you who have not been here before do not know what a ham Indiana can be. Okay. This is the way that you travel when you go to Petra. Good arrow. And every once in a while, he will have his own participation. By the way, if anybody thinks about going to sleep, all right. This is the entrance into Petra. Notice on the right where it has a red arrow. That's one of the carvings in the wall. Very difficult to see there, but we'll see more of them. We talked about water. The trough on the left is for water. Sometimes it had terracotta over. Sometimes it was just like this, where the water would flow down. There it is on the left. Some vegetation. Again, we're going through the canyon from the beginning of Petra, the opening, into the city. We're headed towards a building called the Treasury. One of the neat things, clippity-clop, 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 is to hear the horses going in and out for $20. Wait a minute. Ah, there he is. On the left and on the right, how narrow those passages get. Again, left and on the right. We're beginning to see in the wall some of the carvings. I'm not sure if that's a cross. Petra itself was probably at its height around Christ's time. Several hundred years before, several hundred years afterwards. On the right, the Romans probably are the ones attributed with putting down the paving stones, and that's when the horses, it's a neat sound. Again, paving stones on the right. Into the canyon. It's about a mile, little vegetation, more vegetation. Getting closer. Look up, sometimes the walls are 10 feet apart. They go up about 600 feet or so. Again, the horse. The water on the right, the left slide, red arrow. A dam to manage the water. The Nabitans were excellent in managing the water. Tourists. Then, coming out of the canyon, and this is what you begin to see. And there it is. It's about 127 feet high, 92 feet wide. Doesn't go back into the walls very deep. There it is again. It's called the treasury because the Turks thought that maybe that's where some hidden treasure was, some gold. And they took pot shots at the center, and you can't see it on the slide here, but there's the center dome up there is scarred with gunshots. This is the view on the left, down. This is the view from which it was taken, and where the arrow is a small, small little tourist spot. About a little less than a mile or so going up. Notice the fellow on the right with the striped shirt. You'll see him in a minute. This gentleman is from Mongolia. One of his items of bucket list was to get to Petra, and there he is. Transportation, left camel, right donkey. Once you leave the treasury and kind of continue on through this cavity here to the left, you begin to get in some tourist areas. I was there quite early and they were not really that open. This is a satellite view. The red on the right is what we have walked through. The center blue is where the treasury is. The black line is what we'll take, and then the green line is to climb up above where we saw that picture from a high. This is the Nabitan Theater, probably built during Roman times, but not while the Romans were actually in control of Petra. But it shows, it exhibits a lot of Roman architecture from a high looking down. A lot of the structures or the cavities were tombs. Sometimes they were just, I think they're called tricliniums, which is a cavity, and you would go in and there would be beds on three sides, not chairs, but beds, and you would go and sit on the bed and trade. You got to finish trading, you go to sleep. This is down in the center along that black line that we saw earlier. These are Roman times, Main Street, Roman columns. The structure in the right is non-existent. There's a glass pane, and they have painted what the temple would have looked like in those days. It's completely gone now. Another temple. Transportation. Again, to the left of the treasury, we have gone through the center. The red line up to the top is the monastery. And that's another signature structure of Petra. The church is a Byzantine church. That's what it looked like on the inside. And those are some of the floors. The church, about a 0.1 of a mile. I think there were 1,000 steps where there were steps up to the monastery. This is the beginning. The question mark Cavities in the walls could have been tricliniums, however it's said, or burial spots. Look carefully. Think what it might be. Anybody have any ideas? How many of you thought it was a parking garage? This is an area where the Bedouins who managed and maintained Petra for a number of years recently, before it was declared a World Heritage Site, they would live and sell to tourists. The Jordanian government came in and said, we need to develop this, and we don't need you guys living here. So move on out, and they provided a town. There's about 2,000 or so that come in every day. They can come in this close and park their vehicles. One of the neat things about it is that they do not pay sales tax. So if you buy something in Petra, you're not doing the sales tax. This is the beginning of the steps. The red arrow shows a fellow on up. Looking backwards. Continuing. Anytime you have tourists, you're going to have people selling things. Looking back down towards the valley. More sculpture on the side. Some of the steps, about 1,000. On the cavities on the left. Tourist items. Just climbing, climbing, climbing. Just about halfway. Looking back. Continuing to climb. Continuing to climb. This guy got tired. We're almost there, but we're not quite there. I think this slide is interesting because it shows the strata in the rocks, the various colors. Donkeys coming down, continuing to climb. Looking back, continuing to climb. We're almost there. If you're kind of bored, take the level of your boredom and translate it to how tired I was. I was about at 970 steps. I was wanting this part of the journey to be over. And we found that. Now we're going to see another slide. The monastery is back to the right, and we're a little bit higher than the platform area there. The red arrow is another place where you climb up and look down. There is the monastery. The room inside is only about 30 feet cubic. It's probably a burial plot. There's some speculation as to when it might have been developed. The red area is an aerial satellite view, and you can kind of see we came up the red line, turned around, and there is the monastery. There it is again from a high. You can kind of see we came down a little bit. There's a place you climb up to. There it is. The red arrow shows the side of the monastery. That's looking towards the Dead Sea. One of my philosophies of life is never climb higher than the goat. Always make sure the goats are above you. And there's a goat who got hungry. Again, the monastery. Magnificent. How were these things carved? Looking back down the canyon. The lion triclinium. Again, this is a room where there's trading. This is called the lion because on the right you can kind of see the outline of what appears to be a carved facade lion. Upper right and left is Medusa. So they used mythology. There's the lion. Always keep the goat higher. Then it was time to go to the road to Amman. That brings to our conclusion of this portion of a fabulous trip for me this summer. I hope that I have been able to share some of the vistas. There's a map of Jordan. It shows on the board over there a little bit of where we were. Might anybody have any questions?
Certainly. The Byzantine noticed they had images in the floor where they covered up during Arab Muslim
Oh, yeah,
occupation.
yeah, this is all excavated. There's about 200, I'm told, burial sites, temples, or cavities and so forth. The monastery was completely covered. It's kind of interesting, Petra was about Christ's time, 400 years before, 300 years after, destroyed because of earthquakes. Eventually, there was some Middle Ages in there. There's a Crusaders' castle proximate to it. But for a long time, up until about 1806 or 7, somewhere along in there, there were rumors of it for people traveling in the area. But no one had brought it to the attention of the Western world in the way that it needed to be brought for development of tourism and so forth and so on. An Englishman decided that he was going to penetrate that area, learned Arabic, dressed himself as an Arab, went to Wadi Rum area, finally convinced to be taken to Petra, and Bedouins were living there, and it was completely, much of what we see was completely covered. There's only, I don't know what the percentage is, a minimal excavated actually, in the Byzantine temple or church was one of them.
And were the monastery and the treasury carved at approximately the same time?
The treasury supposedly was carved a little earlier by 20 or 30 years. I think the book that's passing around has this stuff in. I think it was 20 BC to 20 AD or something like that.
So as a town, it didn't exist in biblical, in Old Testament
Well,
time.
no, it did. Actually, the height of the population was about 20,000.
But I mean, at the time of Jeremiah, all that stuff,
In the Old Testament
in
times?
the Old Testament time.
Well, probably not. Probably, there may have been some overlap. Probably not. Where's our parson?
There he is. I can look it up.
I'm wondering if there was and I don't know this, but, kind of a movement to the desert to kind of get away, just like the Essenes along the Dead Sea ended up in the canyons along the Dead Sea. It might have been about the same time.
Could well have been, but Petra itself and the civilization and the military strength, I would opine, was not moving away from something, but migrating for trade purposes, and it's located in trade routes, if you will, and then being able to know where the water is, manage the water. And then the other traders would come through thirsty, and the concept would be, if you're that thirsty, then it's going to cost you this much for me to give you the water that we have stored, or for me to show you where you can get water. And the water engineering, the hydraulics, is supposedly the genesis and the basis and the reason of existence for Petra. If I heard you that people were moving away, now it was you can see it was easily to defend because of the entries. But I don't think that they migrated there running away from somebody else. I don't know how they discovered it. Guys?
Well, okay, what they're calling the monastery, did they cut rooms into the rock?
No. Well, there was a large room behind in that central door in what's called the monastery. It's about, we could not go in and look at it. It's about 30 feet by 30 feet by 30 feet, a cube. They're not really sure which king it was developed for, but it was a single. Why it's called a monastery, I either didn't see, can't remember. We can't make up a good story for it.
Well, it says Christianity found its way to Petra in the 4th century AD. Google.
That's when Christianity found it?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Petra.
And that's about the time that the Romans were coming in. And one of the drawings that we have over here on the sands there, some British artist went through, and you'll notice that one there, I think, is, that is the treasury it shows only 3 columns. One of the columns was developed after 1802 or so, when the tourist business started.
Did they say anything about how they carved?
They started at the top. They
Started
built a
at the top.
scaffold. Started at the top. They had metal instruments, and they would chisel in. Just think of the geometry, and the precision.
What were they standing on?
Scaffolding made out of reeds.
Oh,
Or they would climb up and chisel in and put a piece of wood in and stand on it. With some of the pictures, I think, in the book suggest some sort of scaffold. And they would start at the top and work down.
yeah.
Was this trip, all the walking and photo, was that done in one day?
Well, yes, in Petra itself.
Yeah.
I was there 2 times.
Okay.
The second time was on the formal tour, and we only had 2 hours.
Okay.
And that's when I had my eye on a hat for my honey, and I knew exactly where I wanted to go. And it was about halfway into at one of the tourist shops. But the first time when I took all these pictures, and that's the reason that there were a lot of places I couldn't go to. It cost $75 to go into Petra. So that's $75 each time you go in. And I was there at opening at 8 o'clock and was thrown out at, I think about 8 o'clock that night by the people. Because I wanted to take advantage of the time. And I'm married, so I have to watch my budget.
Are there a lot of different languages?
Arabic is really the language that's used there. I don't know whether there was a Nabatean language or not. Paul, do you know?
I don't know.
But Arabic was the language of today, and English, and then I heard French, German, and Chinese, and Korean, and all kinds of different languages. Some of us are knowing that it's after 8 o'clock. Thank you guys very much. Anybody that would like to hang around, and I'll be happy to stay with you. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, John.
And I went out to see if they, because there was a couple that said they might come.
Round up California.
I believe Fisher does.
He's out
I don't
there.
know. Yeah. Well, are these yours?
Yes, they are. Thank you very much.
You saved the day. But John's more so.
Did you see the book?
He's got a new one.
I laid it out.
Oh, that's good. I saw it today and I can't believe
It's about 100 years old. It's the oldest screen I've ever seen.